Sometimes people are afraid. They're afraid if I ask a question, if I do this, you're going to take the offer away. Well, you know what? You need to be more afraid of the fact that you're going to start working there and you're going to be overworked and underpaid and be bitter and mad. How about that? All right. So it's better. So which fear is more important to you? I'm more afraid of not standing for myself than I am of standing for myself. You should see yourself as valuable. So if a company is like, well, we don't want to do business with you, because that's basically what it is. Employment is doing business. If we don't want to do business with you, if you have questions about the contract, because that's what employment agreement is, it's contract. So you want to work there? Really? Okay. Really? Okay. Well, if you're treated crazy on the front end, rest assured, you're about to go get like trashed on the back end when you start working. Rest assured.
My name is Fela Abioye, and this is How to Corporate, my digital show dedicated to helping you identify what's holding you back so you can advance your career. Are you ready for today's topic? Well, let's get started. I'm really excited today to welcome back my first repeat guest, Dr. Rochelle Parks-Yancy. Dr. Yancy was one of my first guests in episode 2, How to Negotiate Your Worth. Go check that episode out. She shared a ton of gems in that episode focused on pretty much helping you prepare for the negotiation process when looking to secure that initial job offer. Very, very popular episode. I highly encourage you to go check that one out. And because we couldn't fit all the things I want to talk about in that episode, I had to bring it back. I had to continue the conversation, but slightly focused in a new area. So today, the focus is going to be around counteroffers. Okay? Counteroffers. So for the folks that may not know who you are, Dr. Yancy, would you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about your current role and your background?
Absolutely. First of all, as always, Bela, thank you so very much for having me. I really appreciate this. I think what you're doing is outstanding. And I know Bela asked me to talk about myself, but I think before I do that, all of you out there who are like, I want to do this, I want to do that, but you allow, fear and all that to hold you back. Fela is a good example of how he is not doing that. He's done a lot of things that he never would have thought he'd been doing if he had not been willing to take a chance on himself. Fela's married, he's got a kid, he's got a full-time job, but he's got other things that are important to him, and so he makes time for them. So I guess a comment about me would be, I don't make excuses. If something's important to me or you will find the time. And if it is not important to you, you will find an excuse. And so, as Fela said, so I'm a professor of human resources. I'm a career coach. I've written several books, one of which is written with my co-author, and it's called Be Your Best Career Architect. Here are the blueprints. And it describes job hunt, salary negotiations, how you can quit your job without having another one, and things like that. It's available on Amazon. You are welcome to buy it. But anyway, so that's a little bit about me.
Well, no, thank you so much, Dr. Yancy. You've been a mentor and motivator for many of us, not only your former students, but a lot of folks out there on the internet who follow you. You constantly are sharing your knowledge and encouraging folks to go out and try new things and take a chance on yourself.
Right.
So that's what a lot of this conversation is really rooted in at the end of the day. So
it is.
So I really want to start here. So, let's be clear first about, I think, defining the subject at hand, because I think sometimes people think what they have is a job offer, but it kind of smells, sort of sounds like a job offer, but it kind of isn't. So, Dr. Yancy, how would you define an official job offer?
An official job offer in the United States, and I say this because every country is different, but an official job offer in the United States generally means you have something in writing indicating you have this specific position that is at this specific start date, that is at this specific salary or compensation, with these specific, kind of expected duties. And it's from the company, the employer. It's not from the recruiting organization. It's from the company, even if the recruiting organization gives it to you. Too many times I know people who've been like, oh, I have a job offer. Yeah, you've gotten a verbal job offer. And they're like, I'm just waiting for the final offer to, the written offer to come. Then they go and quit their other job. They get on the internet and start running their mouth about the offer that they have. And then for whatever reason, the offer doesn't come. So, you don't have an offer until it's in writing. And let me say this now, too. Even if you have an offer and you think you're going to accept it, back in the day, that used to mean go ahead, quit your current job. No, let's wait a minute, because job offers are rescinded. Okay, that's what happens. Like in 2020, many people, thousands of people had jobs offers in writing, and those job offers were rescinded. So I don't suggest even quitting your job, even if you have a job offer in writing that you plan on, accepting. You quit it when it seems like, this thing may work for a while. If you can ride this out, collect a few checks, then from the new job before you quit the old job. And that's real.
Yeah, no, I think you said it well. There's a couple of different elements in there. I think one, of course, the big piece is having it in writing, because there's a lot of verbal conversations, of course, you have back and forth, whether it be with recruiters, whether it be with employers, and they could give you an indication like, yeah, we're definitely going to offer you the job, but you could run off making assumptions, but you don't know what process they still have to go through, right, to ensure that you are the quote unquote fit for it. So, and if they somehow renege on that and you put all your eggs in that basket,
which happens,
which does happen, what does that leave you? So having something definitely in writing, though, anything could still happen, but it makes a big difference, right? So for sure. So I think that's a really big element there. And then I think the other piece, like you talked about, is, sometimes you get these offers in and time goes on. Maybe you've got it and your start date's not 6 months from now. I don't know, maybe 3 months, 2 months, whatever it is. It may not be immediate. And you make a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to take some time off from my job, for whatever my current role is. You quit, you got this job, and it doesn't start for 3, 4, 5 months, whatever the case may be. And then that time comes, and then it winds up canceling out. Maybe they renege on the offer. And then where does that leave you? So,
and a good example of that is, just really quickly, is this summer when, Facebook had offered a number of people employment to start 6 to 8 weeks down the road, and some of them quit their jobs and they've moved. And again, if your money's not an issue for you, fine. But and then Facebook's like, oh, sorry, no job. We may give you 1 month severance, but you've already made 2 months worth of bills. So, don't be in a rush to just believe what these companies are telling you. Let's wait a minute. Relax.
No, that's a fact. That's a fact. So, okay. All right. So going back to the basics, right? So once you have the job offer in hand, right, in writing, electronically, assuming, that usually the key step in that process is evaluating whether the offer is acceptable or whether you want to counter, right? So what steps do you take, or would you take, to evaluate whether a job offer is acceptable or unacceptable? Hey, if you're enjoying what you're hearing and learning something new, take a second to rate this episode and write a review. Oh, don't forget to share with a friend or a colleague. All right, back to the show.
You should always plan to counter. That's just facts. All right. And the reason why you should always plan to counter is because, think about it like this. A company's job is to keep employment costs down. That is their job. That is their responsibility. It is your job to get your money up. In other words, negotiate to get, the level that you're worth for that role in that city, in that state, in that company. So you should generally assume that the first offer is by no means the best offer. Not at all, right? So you should plan to counter, period. You should plan to counter. So that was the first part. And then the next part is, of course, presuming you've done your salary homework, which you should do. I mean, I don't want to reiterate too much of what I said before in the previous podcast, but basically the time to start knowing what your worth is before you even, before you get to the job offer stage. In fact, it needs to be when you even apply for the job, because a fair question for someone to ask you on an initial interview is, how much are you looking for? And if you don't know how much you're worth, you're going to be like, oh, now you can ask them, well, what's the range? It's a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
You ask them. Absolutely. This goes both ways, but it is fair for them to ask you. And if you don't know, that's your fault. That is not theirs. So in the prior podcast, I went over different sites to look at and how to, find out what your worth is. For example, individual, we'll call him Walter. Walter was initially offered $122,000, benefits, holidays, 2 weeks vacation, 10 days, 6 days, car, cell phone, stuff like that, right? Now, but Walter had done his homework, okay? And he knew that he was worth anywhere between about 140, 160, because he had done his salary homework. So he had no intention on, accepting that offer. So what he initially did was he countered. And so he countered by basically, I kind of wrote it down. So I'm going to read some of it. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'll give you a sense. Okay. He basically said, thank you for the opportunity. And so that's first. Then he said something along the lines of, I'm excited about the opportunity to work for the name of the company. Right. However, I've thought it over, and the amount that I was offered, or whatever, there's $122,000. It's about $35,000 less than what I was expecting, based upon industry averages, my individual worth, and the salary research that I have done for this position. So it's okay to own that you've done your homework. Own that. Okay. And then what he did was he then began to he made the case. He said, well, as you know, I've done this project. I've done that project. I made this amount of money. I saved this amount of time, over my prior position. Therefore, the work that I've done, warrants the compensation for which I'm asking, again, based upon the homework that I've done. In addition, he was interested in also getting a master's degree. I am seeking to further my education. And the reason why, but see, he related it back to the company. Don't make everything about you, relate it back to the firm. I'm seeking to further my education because I've noticed that the leaders of this firm all have master's degrees. And I'm interested in becoming a leader, and contributing to this firm. And, rest assured, I'll be a great contributor to your organization. And that was his counter.
Well, that makes a lot of sense there. So you hit on a bunch of different elements in it. It's funny because one of my next questions was, what type of maybe benefits or compensation items could one counter, right? So what are some examples? And you named a really great one right there, is not just the research element of your own compensation, right? Going into the conversation to say, hey, before you even have that convo to say, here's what I expect, you are already prepared. I already have measurable, tangible, actual points to show that here's why I believe I should be compensated in this way and that way. And so another element of that was going back to the MBA piece. And I think you hit a really big nail on the head, is not making it all just about you, showing the company or the employer, the potential employer, what they're going to get out of it. Right. So if you pay for my MBA, then I will reinvest those skills back into your organization to hopefully become a future leader, which I would hope that you'd want, in the future as well. So being able to tie it back to them as well, I think is a huge example of when one's going through that preparation. So no, that's awesome. Is there any other maybe, items or types of compensation or areas that one can can kind of quote unquote negotiate, I think we always lean towards salary, right? That's always the first thing that's always, kind of top of mind. But is there any other maybe examples that you would recommend for people to keep top of mind?
Yes. And let me say this now, when you're doing your salary homework, the salary, that's one part, but doing these other things I'm about to mention, that's part of it too. You need to have all that ready in your arsenal before you have one conversation with the employer. All right. So let me name some things, and every industry is different. So you have to know what's relevant for your industry. Okay. Moving expenses, relocation expenses. That is, another negotiable item. Vacation days, sick days, personal days. See, some organizations lump them all days off as one. Some separate them out. It depends. Work from home. That is also, a negotiable item. We get 2 days at home, 3 days at home, whatever it is. Childcare allowances, bonuses, stock options, grants. In my industry, university grants, which are basically cash money. That's the best way to put it. Getting your education paid for. If your job involves a fair amount of driving, do you have a car allowance or even public transportation? Do they give you a public transportation allowance? If you have to use a cell phone specifically for work, side note, please keep things separate. Don't use your personal phone for work. Okay. Parking. You have to drive and you got to, pay $20 a week to park. All of those fall under negotiable. So you have to decide what is relevant for your industry, number one. And then number two, what is important to you? What is I forgot, health benefits. As I talked before, I said benefits, but I mentioned this last podcast, it is not enough for you to just say, I want health benefits. You better ask up front before you accept the offer, how much do I pay out of pocket for those benefits, and what do those benefits entail? And if they will not tell you or cannot tell you, that's a bad sign. So those are all some examples of other negotiable items that, again, you need to know before you have one conversation with an employer. So like going back to the person I talked about, Walter, we had already gone through all that. And so when he had his counter ready with that education piece, he had already done his homework on that and decided, yeah, that's something that's valuable to me.
No, that's those are very, very excellent gems right there. So I think as you were kind of running down that list, I think something that always resonates with me that I think you said before was just as much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them, right? So,
Facts.
And so when you're considering, right, working at this place, right, offering your services, then you need to know the whole picture, or at least as much of it that you can get. And this interview process is the best time to do it. So, right. So, being able to get all that information definitely is key. But
and if I can jump in here, I get that sometimes people are afraid. They're afraid if I ask a question, if I do this, you're going to take the offer away. Well, you know what? You need to be more afraid of the fact that you're going to start working there and you're going to be overworked and underpaid to be bitter and mad. How about that? All right. So it's better. So which fear is more important to you? I'm more afraid of not standing for myself than I am of standing for myself, because I'm not a victim. I'm a winner and I don't whine. So if I didn't ask for something, that is my fault. That is, that's not the firm's fault. And also, honestly, you should see yourself as valuable. So if a company is like, well, we don't want to do business with you, because that's basically what it is. Employment is doing business. If we don't want to do business with you, if you have questions about the contract, because that's what employment agreement is, it's contract. So you want to work there? Really? Okay. Really? Okay. Well, if you're treated crazy on the front end, rest assured, you're about to go get trashed on the back end when you start working there. Rest assured.
So kind of brings it to my next question. So let's say the offer is unacceptable, right? You don't like it. And of course, I think assume most people would want to counter whatever that offer is. And
you should counter. I'm telling you now, if you don't counter, the company's like, thank you.
And I think I know you answered this already, right? But what if the person believes that, well, I got everything I wanted. I had a number in mind. I did all my research. I researched all my benefits. I've got everything. Should I push back still? Because I think some people fall into that category, and I'm not saying that, I think sometimes our standards of what we think we can get, right, may even be a little lower depending on where you are. And I'm not saying that people have low standards. Don't get me wrong, right?
There's always, again, I'm not saying that if you're happy with, say, the salary, let's suppose you are, okay, fine. But you can ask for another week's vacation, right?
Yep.
You can ask for, I forgot to mention, I talked about education, but not just degrees, but professional development, conferences you might want to go to, right? It's basically it's like a marriage, or like when you're dating. You are never so hot or attractive as you are on the first date. That's facts. So you get all you can. Okay? Because they're going to get every little bit out of you when you marry them. Rest assured. So you may be happy with some things, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for a little more. And I'll tell you why. It's because back to what I said. The organization is not giving you everything up front. Who gives away all the milk up front? That's stupid. No, you got to work to get the milk. All the milk. So yes, I stand by what I said. You should always plan to counter.
All right. Everybody got that. Always plan to counter. There you go. So, okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Plan to counter.
So you touched on the fear element that I think comes into play a lot for people. And maybe I'm getting into this from a psychological perspective, but why do you think people are so fearful? Like, why do you think that happens so often?
It really goes back to school. I return to school. I always return to school. And school generally teaches people, doesn't really teach people, let me tell you that, to advocate in an effective way for themselves. Or it doesn't do a good job of translating. Like, you may be that student who's got to fight to get that B, right? You're on the line of that C plus, and you're like, what can I say to get that B? See, some people are going to be like, well, okay, F it. I'll just take the C plus. I'm not the one, I'm like, no, let me see what I can do. Now, it may not work out, but I'm going to try, right? But see, it's literally the same. A lot of times people don't translate that, though, to their salary negotiation or their day-to-day life, but it's literally the same thing. Just like you went to that professor and you were like, can I get an A? What I got to do again? Okay, well, I had this happen and I did this and I can do this. And you know what I mean? And you get that, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Well, it's the same thing. You have to advocate for yourself. School, I've said this before, school really teaches people this whole garbage lie of if you just sit back and do the right thing, you're going to get rewarded to the max. And that's just some BS. That's just not true. You're going to get what you stand for. You do not get what you deserve. You will get paid what you negotiate. So I understand that people are not all comfortable with advocating for themselves, but so what? You deal with that. There's a lot of things in life that we're uncomfortable doing. I was uncomfortable being a parent. Well, I am. So, and it's a lot of other things, so instead of getting all in your feelings, like, I don't like it, I am not comfortable, change your mindset to, I don't like it and I'm not comfortable and I don't care because I need to do this to push myself forward. I need to do this because it's going to help me and my money in the long run. And it's not just money, though. I have found, and you may experience this yourself, Bella, that when people work with me, do engage in a negotiation, and they feel, even if they only got like $1,000 more, $2 more, or it's per hour, $2 more per hour, they feel so great. They feel like I am the king of the world, and that carries on to the next negotiation, and it gets stronger and stronger. So one, you want to negotiate to get your money, I mean, of course, but you also want to negotiate because if you're going to stand up for yourself in that context, you will stand up for yourself in other contexts. As Fela knows, I don't do victims or whiners or losers. You're a winner or you are not. And being a winner means you are willing to stand for you and professionally fight for you in the face of fear and adversity that mostly comes from ourselves.
Mm, mm. Well, no, I think that's powerful. I've heard these messages for a long time now, so it's ingrained within me now. So, but no, it is important because that fear does exist for a lot of people, even for myself, at one point in my career as well. So, but I think the big piece is doing it anyway, just doing it scared, because you won't know if you don't try. And right. I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned walking away feeling like, even if you got a little bit, even if you didn't get the whole way of what you initially wanted, even if you walked away with just a piece of what you wanted, you feel even stronger about accepting said opportunity, or about going into this new career, this new situation. Like, wow, I feel really great about it. But when you feel like, I walked away and I left something on the table, I didn't really get what I really wanted, it's an element of yourself that you're almost leaving behind too. So I think that's
right,
really well
you
said.
feel badly later on at night. You're looking at yourself and you're thinking, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why didn't I ask for this? Why didn't? And I just can't accept that in me. I just can't.
So let me ask you this then. So let's say you walk into a situation, you've got the right mindset, you're prepared, you're ready, you're about to go in, you're ready to do that counteroffer, have that dance. But you face an employer that's not willing to entertain it, that's not willing to have the conversation, and it just pretty much cuts you off right there at the legs. How do you tactfully still have that conversation without getting frustrated? Hey, if you're enjoying what you're hearing and learning something new, take a second to rate this episode and write a review. Oh, don't forget to share with a friend or a colleague. All right, back to the show.
Well, so here's the thing. And let me say this now. I've had some clients who've gone through 4 or 5 rounds of negotiations before, they came to an agreement. So here's the thing. If an employer is genuinely like, we will not do anything, as in not just no salary, but none of the other compensable items that I mentioned either, absolute nothing. Well, they don't really value you. All right. They want your labor, but they want it at a cheap price. Because remember, I said the initial offer is never a top offer. So it's usually going to be at the mid or the lowest. All right. So if they literally will not negotiate on anything, I mean, no items, nothing at all, they hate you. No, I'm kidding. But they don't value you. They don't value you. And you have to make that decision. Is that where you want to work? All right. Having said that, I do understand some employers are like, no, we're not going to be able to do that. Well, now, wait. That's why when I talked about Walter, he ended up at $150,000, same holidays, same benefits, 3 weeks vacation instead of 2, and they paid for the MBA program. So did he get the top of the amount that he was asking for? No, of course not. But he did get some other things that he really cared about, right? So it's kind of just to summarize, if an employer refuses to negotiate on anything at all, they don't value you. But if they're like, well, no, we can't do that, then present some other options. And that's why knowing those other counter items besides just salary are so important. Back when I was paying childcare, we were paying what? About $250 a week. So if that's covered, that is money in our pocket. It's a lot of money in our pocket, right? So, for people who care about PTO, especially for yourself, number one, but number two, if you have kids, it's sick, you got to be off whenever, right? Having another 2 weeks of paid time off is a big thing. So yeah, that's really my suggestion. You need to be prepared with the other items.
Got you. Okay, that makes sense. So I thought it important to note that when going down this path of counteroffers, doing a negotiation internally, right? When you work for an employer, right? Doing a negotiation with your current employer versus externally, right? A prospective employer. I think there's a difference sometimes. So from that lens, I think, Nancy, could you maybe provide one or two recommendations of how you would handle a counteroffer differently when discussing it internally versus externally?
It's not all that different because
Okay.
you still need to know your dollar worth in that company for that role in that city, in that state, in that industry and country. You still need to know that. Now, the good thing is because you are an insider, you also have a better sense of, well, what are some things that the company actually does do, you know? So I'll give you an example. Sometimes people don't know everything their company does because they don't ask enough questions, you know? So, for example, there was a particular individual, they did not know that their company would pay up to about $5,000 a year for professional development. Because they didn't ask about it, right? So we talked about that. I'm like, well, is that important to you? Because there were some like conferences or certifications, something they really wanted. And they were like, yeah. I'm like, well, why don't you go and include that in your negotiation, right? And so they ended up getting that, but they wouldn't have gotten that if they had not asked for it. So you certainly now have a better idea of, okay, within this company. So now you can relate your accomplishments within the firm to, that role. So within this firm, here's why I'm worth this amount, whatever, it is based on your homework. Because in this firm, I've done X, Y, Z. I mentioned this before. I'll say it again. It is not enough for you to say I've been someplace a long time. That means jack. All right. I've said this before. I will say it again. If you've done something in 20 years, don't tell me about 20 years. Tell me about what you specifically accomplished, to push that organization forward in 20 years. Don't just say I've been there 20 years. So relating your accomplishments within the organization and asking about those negotiable items, same thing. That part is still the same.
All right. So assume that you've accepted the offer and you feel good about it, but time has passed. Maybe a week, 2 weeks go by. You start to really think about it and you're like, I really didn't get fully what I thought I should have got. So is it too late to go back for a counteroffer? Is it too late to do that? Or is it kind of a one and done? And once you miss that opportunity, that's it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, now, once you've signed and accepted the offer, you can certainly, go back and say, well, this is what I think I'm worth, but what is the basis for this? Is this based upon you having done more salary homework that you didn't do before? Is it because you told somebody and they said, girl, you should get more? You know what I mean? So if you're going to do this, fully expect for the organization to be like, really? But I didn't make you sign this, Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying that there should be a good reason for yourself as to why. If you genuinely did some prior salary homework before and you overlooked some things, or a circumstance may have happened where your husband, but in between time you accepted the new job and, and you're supposed to start, the spouse might get laid off and you might need to change your work schedule. Maybe we need to do work from home. Things can happen. I understand that. So, but you still go through the same process. I've accepted the offer. I appreciate that. But here are some other, things that, I'm worth or that my circumstances happen or something like that. But again, let this be based upon facts and data, not I feel I should get more. I don't know what that means. I feel facts and data in this regard.
Yeah. I think that's a key point right there, is making sure everything is evidence-based, right? Not just,
right.
I just want more, right? Because I think there's that fine line that we're always trying to straddle a little bit, right? With the employer, with making sure that you you negotiate your work, you stand up for yourself, you're making sure that you feel like you get what you is just
Absolutely.
but at the same time, not quote unquote turning people off, right? I think that's the thing that we sometimes worry, right? As folks going out is turning someone
Absolutely.
off. And depending on how you tactfully handle that right there, it could very well be a turnoff. If somebody doesn't give a just reason why, they're looking to counter, then, they may be say, you know what, we had someone else in line who was right behind you, but honestly, we feel good about them too. And so I guess to the point that you named earlier about rescinding offers, that's a risk that one has to be prepared to take, to say that, listen, if they're interviewing, they're interviewing other people as well. So it doesn't mean that there's no one else that they had, in their pipeline to say that they were looking to offer. So you have to be prepared for both outcomes.
But that's why, now again, if something happens, again, because I have a situation where, the person accepted their offer, then their spouse got laid off, and their whole work schedule will change, and they had to go back and, renegotiate that. And that makes obviously, but it's not a company's fault if you didn't do your salary homework on the front end. That's just not their fault. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't still go try to get what you discovered you're worth, but this is why you should do all this on the front end and not on the back end. Know your worth up front.
Back. So let me ask you this then. Is there such a thing as too much negotiating, right? Like, if you have an offer, you do a counter offer, and then, they counter back with what they hope with is a resolution for acceptance, but you decide to counter again, or maybe you're on a third, a fourth, however many rounds. Is there such thing as too much countering?
I mean, as I said, I've had some clients go through 4 and 5 rounds of negotiation before, they came to an agreement. So there's no real absolute on that. That's going to be kind of, what do you genuinely feel? I think the biggest thing are you operating from a place of confidence, or are you operating from a place of fear? So are you giving up on this negotiation because you are genuinely happy with what you got? Or are you giving up because you're not happy at all with what you got, but you're afraid? And you're allowing fear to hold you back. So that's really my only comment on that. Like, I can't, for some people, they get what they want in 2 rounds. Some people don't take 4.
Yeah. It's a fact.
It just varies.
No,
it varies. And it varies not just with individual, it varies with job. For some jobs, you may, just like with interviewing, for some jobs, you may go through 2 rounds of interviews. For other jobs, you may go through 4.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. So I would love to continue this, to say the least. I really got more questions, but I think I'm gonna have to just make this a continuation series. Honestly.
Well, I think I'd like to add one more thing, though. Do we have a minute?
Yeah, no.
Okay,
so most definitely.
There are different things that you could even go back, though, and say, you know what, I thought I wanted this, but I think I've done some homework and this thing would be better. So, to give you an example, there's an individual, we'll just call her Martha. So Martha, got the offer she wanted, and she also negotiated to get a $20,000 signing bonus. All right. Very happy about that. But then, Martha and I talked about it. I said, well, Martha, have you consulted with your accountant or, tax person to see, is this going to hurt you in terms of your tax liability for the following year? So she did that, and she realized that 20,000, it would put her in a whole different bracket. And so she would also end up not taking home very much of it. And so what she did was she went back to them, because she had, done her homework over the value of the stock for the company, right, for like the past, 12, 16 quarters. Anyway, and said, hey, I don't want the $20,000 in the bonus. I'd prefer to have that in stock options. And they said, okay.
Wow.
So that's the benefit of having some idea of all the negotiables that you care about. And even if it's something where you're like, Well, I've never heard of that before. Well, I haven't heard of a lot of things before. That doesn't mean they don't exist, and doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for them if they're important to you. Don't be a follower and wait on what you've heard other people doing. That's what followers do. You figure out what works for you and you go for yours.
That's a fact. That's a gem right there. I mean, it's a new way of thinking, especially if you haven't been in that situation before. So the fact that you're able to put that on her mind, to have that foresight to be able to recognize that she wouldn't even know what she's getting, because I mean that brings up a really excellent point. Some of the things that we think are important, whether it be financially, just upfront cash, how, what's your take home like, right? What is your true take home?
The government's going to kill you.
Exactly. And depending on what state you live in, state income tax and whatnot. So that compensation may be better suited in other areas. So versus straight cash. So, being prepared and being able to think in that way definitely is a big element, though. That's awesome. That's a great gem. But thank you for sharing that. Well, so we'll bring this to a close, and again, definitely gonna have to continue this conversation, definitely in some way, in some more series. But I appreciate you, Dr. Yancy, for sure.
So in the meantime, don't forget that this is on Amazon. And Thanks. You are very welcome to buy it. We won't say no.
Trust me, I was gonna give you your spot. Don't worry to offer that, and I'll make sure to share that in the show notes as well. So Dr. Yancy is most definitely a career strategist, resume writer, and just help you negotiate your whole career. So she is most definitely the one that you want to reach out to, and I'll have all that information most definitely in the show notes with the link to her book as well. So, and I really just want to remind folks that, learning is really the first step of all these things. These are building blocks. And so it doesn't mean much if you don't put this stuff into action, right? You can listen all day to these different episodes and listen to all the great advice that Dr. Yancy is giving. But if you don't find opportunities to actually put this stuff into action, you'll never really build the stamina, the strength to actually perform, right? Because that's the only real way. You got to go out and perform. You got to put this stuff into action. So I would just encourage everybody to really take this information out there and go out and practice, because that's a big element of this whole thing is practice. And that's a big takeaway that we talked about during episode number 2 is practice, right? Negotiating, doing the counter offers, doing it in the mirror, doing it across someone, whether it's a spouse, a friend, have someone give you some adverse reaction. And then how would you respond to that? Practice so that we can go into those conversations prepared.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to share your contact information, maybe.
I'm Dr. Rochelle Parks-Yancy. You can certainly message me on LinkedIn. I said this before. It's okay for us to connect and never talk to each other. You don't even have to send me a note with your connection message. We can just connect, but don't be weird. And as long as you're not that, then you don't try to sell me anything either. As long as you don't do those things, then we can connect, and it's perfectly fine.
Awesome. I'll make sure I have all that in the show notes. Everybody, appreciate you for tuning in. Until next time, peace. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For more content, click the link in my bio to follow How to Corporate on all social media platforms. Until next time, keep building.